Thank you. Morning. Morning. Thank you. Please, thank you. General Everhart, Chief Fry, thanks so much for your leadership in Air Mobility Command, your leadership in our Air Force. Your passion, your dedication is renowned and really making a difference. General Fogelman, great to see you, sir. You know, so let me just kind of talk about, before I kind of get started with just a few slides, and then maybe we'll have some time for a Q&A at the end, but let me talk about Chief Mike Curver for a minute. So since he kind of recollect on our first exposure. So, you know, as you get ready to make that transition, you know, after a lifetime of service, and you can imagine I'm extremely proud of our Air Force, our airmen. I stand here today not because of largely anything I've done, but largely because of all those people that, you know, helped, supported me, developed me, kind of gave me that candid, honest feedback when I needed it and put me in the right way, and I got a lot of that from Chief Curver. I actually wouldn't have ever made it to be that command chief at 15th EMTF if it weren't for the strong advocacy of Chief Curver, because I wasn't doing well at all on my own after, you know, literally nearly 20 interviews plus of, hey, Chief, you're great, but you're not the one for me, type of thing. You know, it tends to work on you in a lot of different ways, but Chief Curver had a lot of faith in me, continued to advocate me, and then, you know, as I was selected for that position and subsequent ones, he's been a great friend and mentor, and I honestly, from the bottom of my heart, Chief, thank you for everything you've done for Athena and I throughout our careers. Thank you. Yeah. So I don't know if I might have missed it, but I know I saw Sergeant Zimmer up here, and I also think Master Sergeant Select Bradshaw is here. You know, I want them to stand up just one more time. You know, those are two of our 12 outstanding airmen right here in this command with us this week. So why don't you guys stand up and let's give them a round of applause. Yeah. Yeah. So lots of talent in this command, and I know, you know, I have a little time with you this morning, then Secretary James is going to come in, the Vice Chief's going to come in, and I promise you, General Goldfein, your Chief of Staff, wishes he could be here today. He is just locked down, and as you can appreciate, he really doesn't control his calendar. So many others influence it, but he wanted to be here. He wanted to be here so much, I want to play this real video. He wanted to chat with you before I kind of have a few words.
Welcome to the 2016 Airlift Tanker Association Symposium. I'd like to talk to you about one of the great success stories over the last 25 years that we've been in conflict, and that's the incredible performance of our global mobility team. During my 2 years as CFAC in CENTCOM, never once did I have to tell our joint or coalition partners no, never. That simple fact speaks volumes to the can-do culture of our mobility enterprise and the professional airmen that make this critical mission happen every day around the globe. From aerial refueling to humanitarian aid and life-saving care, to placing a SOF team on an objective, to precision airdrop, to getting the right leader to the right place at the right time, you provide operational agility for the joint force. And as the CFAC, I saw this in action every day. As your chief, it's my honor to say thank you to the Total Force Airmen and industry leaders who make it happen. In the end, the United States is a global power because of global mobility. Thank you for this incredible legacy, and have a great conference.
So, you know, you see that rapid mobility now there, and I know you've heard your commander talk about this, and I actually had the privilege of hearing him present this to the Major Command Commanders just a few weeks ago when we were all together at Corona. And I think, you know, like Chief Curver says, I'm real familiar to this command. I think I have a fairly good perspective on what mobility does. I grew up in it, but I'd never heard rapid global mobility now kind of described. I mean, again, I would have gave you a different definition of that till I heard General Everhart kind of talk about this. But I tell you, he had every one of us in that room intently listening, because as you hear him talk with the passion that he does about what it is that each and every one of you do for our Air Force, for our nation, our partners, it really made me start to think, boy, this is just a great tee-up point. So I got up to the stage before he does so I can use all his stuff this morning, right? And now he gets to figure out by the end of this thing, what am I going to talk about? Yeah. But it inspired me to really, for this presentation, to kind of talk about it from a perspective of how I was thinking as he was presenting, you know, RGMN. So, when you think rapid, you think, hey, we respond all over the world all the time. Our AOC at the TCC is moving folks all day long, and we think, hey, that's the rapid part of what we're doing. We're just always doing it. But really how we talked about that readiness piece is really what he's talking about is this command is ready 24/7, 365 on the spot. And that doesn't just happen. And, as busy as our Air Force has been, as busy as everybody in this room has been the entire time they have been wearing the uniform, and those that have taken it off, and how busy they were before they did that, you would sit there and say, hey, we're always ready because we're always doing the mission. The reality is we're bringing in nearly 35,000 young men and women every day, and readiness just doesn't happen. You have to practice and work at it every single day. Well, you think about red flags. Most people in the Air Force, they hear red flag, they think fighters, a big fighter exercise. And that exercise is nothing without AMC. That whole thing stops. When you think about what just finished up in Alaska, and the large-scale exercise, the Red Flag Alaska that we just had, and what we did with airdrop, what we did with refueling, what we did with the partner nations up there, it's unprecedented stuff. And every time we do it just a little bit better. We show just a little bit more capability. We refine our skills. That readiness is so critical. Talk about the 36th Air Evacuation Squadron, Aeromedical Squadron, we just stood up down at Keesler. So as they just recently, within the last couple of weeks, unfurled their flag, before they unfurled their flag, they're, exercising, getting ready with the weather squadron that's down there. Because, certainly this time of year, as we just kind of get close to the end of hurricane season, things are busy. There's a lot of things going on, and the team here has to be ready to go. So it's pretty uplifting and it's pretty motivating when you think about this readiness and the focus that the command consistently puts on this, so they're able to respond in the fashion that they do, and the countless stories that are out there. But what I really love when I see General Everhart, and again, this is indicative of those shoulders that they stand on of those that went before him, but when I watch these two in action, I actually see it in the airmen that they're leading. When they get to tell their story, and you get to see the pride that they have and the mission that you accomplish in this command. So there's a great video here that I want you to watch about some of your AE teams that are out there and what they're doing.
We have the ability to be able to move patients out of harm's way at any given time. So we are called at a moment's notice to pick up patients that may be injured or ill at any point in time, anywhere in Afghanistan. And we have an entire crew that will go out there that consists of 2 flight nurses, 3 air medical evacuation technicians. If we get a patient that's serious enough, we have the ability to be able to bring on a critical care air transport team along with us. That augments our capabilities for an intensive care component.
So our day starts a couple hours before we even get out to the aircraft. And we come here, we do all of our pre-flight inspections. We come and do a crew brief. We go over to intel and sit with the pilots and figure out what our flight plan is going to be for the day. So it's a lot. There's more work that goes into it before the flying than actually flying. And then we take about probably pushing close to 1,000 pounds of gear. So we're prepared for the worst.
And things are a little bit different. When you're in this kind of environment, it's a little different than when you're at home station. So the roles and responsibilities are slightly different. But as for here, we have our Air Medical Evacuation Operations Team, which is our AOT. We are the ground folks, for the most part, that will set up those aircraft before the crews that get out there. So that way we can help expedite things, get them their on-time takeoffs, because sometimes we don't have a whole lot of time to be able to do that.
We have things from gastrointestinal bleeding, sports injuries, even psychiatric patients that are just having a little trouble in their life that need to go back, get some support, and then they can return to duty. All the way up to somebody that's had a really bad day that could have had an amputation, IED blast.
Someone that's vented or someone that has a gunshot wound.
It's a catch-22. We don't want people out there to get hurt. We're just happy to be able to do the job if that should happen. And we have got a great group of people who just love this mission. They love what they do. They take this to heart, and that's exactly what you need in this kind of environment and in this role. If you didn't love what you did, then you probably need to find a new job, and I can't find anybody in this unit right now that really doesn't love what they do.
Yeah. You gotta love it when it sums it up at right end, you know, nothing better than clear text, right? If you don't love what you're doing, you probably need to find a new job. You know, clear text is good. And, you know, but the pride that they have and the understanding they have of what really means to be able to rapidly respond means you're ready to do the job that your nation's gonna ask you to do, and this command does it in spades all the time. But, you know, without readiness, then you have this, you know, this global part, you know, but that's not really how you're talking about that global part in that context. You know, you'd say global, you know, we're all over the world, we can get everywhere, we can touch it, but this is about growth and development. And this is really what I love to hear the General talk about, how important it is for us to continue to grow as airmen, grow as an Air Force, to continue to be able to meet the challenges and the demands that are unforeseen into the future, meaning we can't even predict what we will be engaged with, but we will be engaged without question. And our ability to continue to grow as airmen, to grow as leaders, this conference in itself is that development and growth opportunity. What we learn from each other, you know, and we're doing a lot of things. This command has a history of doing things. I mean, to be honest with you, many other commands template, Phoenix Stripe. I mean, there's just a lot of goodness in how we think about each and every airman as a weapon system and how you have to care and nurture that and grow that throughout a career. And you should be proud of what you're doing in the command. It's having a great impact on our Air Force, how we think about development, and, you know, certainly how we evolve PME, how we evolve everything over time is necessary, but it has to be a constant process. And that's really what General Everhart, Chief Fry talk about when they talk about how we're looking 20, 30, 40 years into the future. You know, if we are contained by the historical view of the world, we are likely going to get stuck. The idea that we have to continue to grow is essential. General McNabb, I'm sorry, I just saw you. It's great to see you, sir, Mrs. McNabb. So, but you know, this other part is, as I've had personal conversations with General Everhart and Chief Fry, you know, it even goes a little bit deeper than this. You know, it's like Captain Christy Wise. We're growing as an Air Force of what it means and who can be an airman. Because 20 years ago, Captain Wise wouldn't be flying airplanes in the United States Air Force. Wouldn't happen. 20 years ago, Tech Sergeant Jason Caswell wouldn't be in the Air Force. You know, Sergeant Caswell, I told this story at AFA, and the General and I really liked it. I wanted to share it with, you know, his brothers and sisters in the command. But, you know, he's a big rugby player, 2010, England, playing rugby, gets an injury out there, pretty traumatic. 4 years, 8 surgeries, physical therapy. It's not happening. He's not going to be able to be an airman anymore with his current physical condition. He's just not going to be able to do it. So he makes an unbelievable decision. You know, it's tragic when you go to war for your nation and you lose a limb and lose a life. It's just tragic. Think about the person that has to make a decision to remove their leg if they want to continue to serve. And that's exactly what Jason did. He realized if he'd have continued on the path that he was on, he would not be able to continue to serve. But however, if he was actually going to have that amputation and be able to then recover and rehab. So here he sits today at Little Rock Air Force Base. He's a crew chief down there, C-130 type guy, just a phenomenal airman. You know, how many of us in this room would actually sit down and say, I'm willing to give up my leg so I can continue to serve in our Air Force, and make that decision, and his family make that decision to commit? What a phenomenal inspiration. But I want you to hear from him and his teammates.
We come out here and we do stellar maintenance. These guys, these maintainers, they're outstanding. I say we, it's a proverbial we, but honestly, I'm debrief. I sit in an office and I review forms, and I try to help out where I can as far as where my duty position is. But I want people to know how professional Little Rock really is.
We fly the C-130J Super Hercules, which is the latest and greatest combat airlifter in the Air Force. We have 28 of them back at Little Rock Air Force Base. We bought 6 of them here for 4 months during this tour, and then continuation for 4 more months.
One of the cool things about the C-130 is that it's small and that it can get in and maneuver around in places where, say, a C-17 can't. So a 2,000-foot airstrip is all we need, unpaved surface to land on, so that gives us a unique capability.
We support forward operating bases, resupply missions, aero medevac missions, patients critical delivery back down to IUD, a multitude of things out here.
Being that we're so spread out at Little Rock, just kind of reach and take from wherever we can get volunteers or people that we need. And most of the time, we do a pretty good job of getting people to kind of raise their hand to come on these trips. Sergeant Caswell is a great example of one of those guys that was jumping up and down, raising their hand to come over. And what he does is coordinates a lot of the maintenance that's going on up there. He'll get phone calls into his office, let him know how the airplane's coming down, what it'll need when it gets back, He's tracking all the stats on all the airplanes. He's keeping all the boards up to date for our production superintendents so they know, basically what they'll have to work with the next day's flying and all that.
I needed to come here. I needed this. This is the culmination of the last 5 years of my life. I had the amputation. I had all the surgeries. I fought to get returned to active duty to be a full service member. I didn't fight to stay in the military to stay home all the time. Yes, I would love to be home with my family right now. Absolutely. Who wouldn't? But I told the hospital when they were talking about me not getting cleared, I said, if you can't clear me to go on this deployment, MEB me out of the military now. I'm not hiding behind an injury. I'm not trying to write out my military career saying, oh, I'm hurt, I can't do this, I can't do that. No, put it in front of me and I'm gonna get through it. You can hit me with anything you wanna hit me with and I'm gonna get through it.
Looking at what he's overcome, the obstacles he's had to face to get to where he is here, and his attitude through the whole thing, and then even being here in the position that he has and the responsibilities that he has, his ability to overcome, I guess, and persevere, his resiliency throughout the whole thing, that makes him a shining example of what you can do.
So, you think about it, it goes back to the previous video, right? He loves his job, and he shouldn't have to find a new job and hasn't. He's out there getting it done. What an incredible, incredible airman. What an incredible Air Mobility Command airman. We should all be proud of him. So, when you think about growth and development, again, so when you put global into it, right, that's not global, but that's global. That's how we have this global presence. It's how we develop the force to the future that's able to get us around the world in moment's notice. As you consistently look at this, so then you think about mobility, right? But really, we're talking about modernization of mobility, and not just modernization in the weapon system. You gotta love that picture right there, right? 1956, there's the first 135 rolling out of the hangar. And there it is up on the top, and we're still flying that bad dog. And I love that airplane, I'll be honest with you. I haven't spent a lot of time in this command and flown that aircraft around the world with our great airmen. I love it. I mean, it's quick, and once you figure out how to work that heater, you are golden. You are golden on that airplane, but it's awesome. But it is amazing when you sit there and think of all the things that our airmen are doing from a standpoint of how do you keep that airplane flying? Nobody else is working on it. The United States Air Force airmen are working on it, keeping that thing flying. So we have to get that KC-46. We're all excited about it. That is the next system that somebody's going to be standing up here in 60 years talking about it, because we'll be flying it for sure if the history bears out. But nonetheless, we're going to keep flying that KC-135 for quite some time. It's going to still be a critical part of our arsenal well into the future. And it takes great airmen to do it, right? It's their innovative spirit. It's we're going to get it done that gets it done. It isn't some factory. It's a person. It's an airman that gets that done. I also, when you think about it, you got Chad Jensen there, Matt Sergeant Jensen there. He's out of McConnell, one of our crew chiefs out there. And I'm a little biased. I love to talk about how our enlisted airmen do just such phenomenal thing that most people would have never considered them capable of doing or even given them the consideration. So this is the guy that's out to Seattle all the time, that's working with Boeing, that's making sure those TOs that we're going to be putting in the hand of that young maintainer that's going to be keeping that airplane in the sky well into the future is written right. An experienced guy that has spent his lifetime over there on that, 18 years on that 135. He knows what air refueling aircraft are all about. He knows what our mission is about. He knows what our airmen need to know. And he himself is helping those people that are really getting paid a lot of money to build us a really awesome aircraft. He's sitting there as a Master Sergeant in the United States Air Force, going to be making a difference well into the future. That's modernization. That's a different way of thinking about how we do business. So, when you think about that innovative spirit, too, and you really have to, and that's how General Everhart talks about it a lot, too. When he thinks about modernization, it's not just about buying that next new thing. One, we're not going to ever have enough money to buy all the next new thing that we would like to. That's why we really need industry here working with us in the way that they are, and that partnership is important. But it does take that innovative spirit by our airmen and how they think about solving problems, how they get us to the next level. In 2014, we started the Airmen Powered by Innovation, and that was really just a motivation of our old IDEA program and stuff. We build on the legacy of those that went before us, but a different approach of getting this done. And when you think about in those 2 years, nearly 7,000 ideas, 200 of which nearly we've put into action, $120 million by airmen in the field, all the way to the top, to just change the way we do business. And we're going to rely on that well into the future, because we're not going to have all the resources that we can just pick off the shelf and get. We're going to rely heavily on our airmen and how we modernize, not just in the weapon systems, but how we think about the ones that we have, how we leverage the talent from a technology standpoint, and how we develop it ourselves to meet our needs, because nobody knows our business better than us. Nobody knows our business better than our airmen. And that's kind of the focus that General Everhart, Chief Fry have put to the command as they move forward into the future. So, and then the now, right? Now I thought that's 365, 24/7, ready to go, right? But that now means that nuclear mission. And I tell you, we have had fits and starts with this in our history of our Air Force, and not for any, malice or forethought where people didn't think it was important. The nation has put tremendous demands on our Air Force at any given time, and we had to focus on the fight in front of us. And it's not hard to understand why sometimes when the fight is so intense in front of you that some things that are extremely critical move a little bit back. But then when you step back to that and look at it in its totality, you realize this nuclear surety, this deterrence is our #1 mission for our country. It is what would keep any would-be real adversary against our nation at bay. This is the one thing. And when you think about the nuclear triad, that's Air Mobility Command in the middle of it, because we don't have that triad without this command. It just doesn't happen. And when you think about how we show that power to the world, and again, remember, this is a deterrent. There's no real great desire to have to execute this mission. This is all about being credible and capable, a reliant nuclear deterrent. And when you put a B-2 and a B-52, and you do this polar exercise, right? And you fly from the U.S. to the north, up around the North Pole, over Alaska, out over the Pacific Ocean to the Alaska-Aleutian Islands. I promise you, those would-be adversaries are paying very close attention to that capability, because they realize they're at risk when they see where we can put airplanes around the world, and that just doesn't happen without Air Mobility Command, moving those airplanes all around the world, because they just can't take care of themselves without you. They just can't do it. It's how you connect to it. And the emphasis that you have put on that in this command is part of that reliance, that reassurance to our nation's leaders and those around the world that we partner with and count on our ability for that nuclear surety. So you should be duly proud of that, duly proud of it. So I want to transition here, and then I really do want to leave some time for some. But last night I had the honor of Air Combat Command honored General Carlisle with their Order of the Sword. And, he talked about the great enlisted airmen, as you would expect, and how it was such an honor for him. But he told a story. And you got to say, okay, you could pick a lot of stories, right? But he told the story of 1929 and the question mark. Now, this is the commander of Air Combat Command, not the commander of Air Mobility Command, right? Who would clearly trace the lineage of this command back to that, right? He talked about General Spatz, our first Chief of Staff, right? He talked about Sergeant Roy Hu and what it took to fly that aircraft for 6 days, 6 hours, and 40 minutes. And it took a sergeant climbing out on the wing of that aircraft and repairing that engine under flight 3 times a day for those 6 days. And he told that story about our airmen and what it is that our airmen do. And when you think about where you can trace our lineage back, and there are so many places you can trace it back to, so many things are built on it, 1929 is pretty far back, right? Pretty far back when you started to show the world, right? To show our own nation's leaders what it meant to have this capability, right? This persistence that only exists with this command. It only exists with the command. So again, I'm extremely proud of each and every one of you. And as I listen to your leadership here, and it's not just Everhart and Chief Fry, it's all the leaders in this command, and they carry that message forward. And that's where I sit, what we see. I also want us to be very respectful of, we didn't just wake up yesterday because we stayed at a Holiday Inn and had a good idea. We're building on the legacy of those folks that went before us. And to be honest, we aren't smart enough to have figured it out to be where we need to go without them putting us where we were when we took the handoff. You have to respect that fact. And I think as you think about the future, you have to understand your history. And I actually listened to General Everhart in his voice and in his passion. We just put some slides to kind of bring you to where you are today and what you look like in the future.
The cost was high in aircraft and in lives. Their sacrifice led to a better understanding of airlift. In order to shape our global enterprise, we must face the challenges and find ways to succeed against overwhelming odds. What you do is critical work, and what you do is noble work. Our military stands ready to promote peace and stability. And when necessary, we will respond to those who do us harm. Everything we do happens because of extremely talented airmen. Whether your mission is airlift,
I am air power.
air refueling,
I am air power.
air support,
I am air power.
or air medical evacuation,
I am air power.
each one of you has a story to tell. And in fact, at this very moment, you are writing a new chapter in our mobility history. And if you hear anything that I say, I want you to listen to me very clearly. We are global reach, we are air power, we are American airmen who get the job done.
So if that doesn't motivate you and inspire you to hear from your commander, how he feels about you and how he views your contribution to your nation, to your Air Force, nothing does. Your heart's probably not in it. It's probably time to look for a new job, right? It's just that simple. It really is. But I tell you, as I reflect a lot, as most of us do as we get, I'm sure, to this point in our careers and lives, you reflect a lot. I am extremely proud and honored to have been part of our Air Force, to have been part of this command. I stand before you as the 17th Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force because of this command, because of the leaders in it, because of the airmen in it, that had faith, that pushed me forward, that overlooked a lot of things, to give me a chance. And I'll be eternally grateful, both Athena and I would, for the lifetime that we've been able to spend with you in uniform. And I am so optimistic and excited about the future because of you. The challenges will be difficult, but you will overcome every one of them, and you will take us to new heights that we can't even predict at this moment in time. So it's been an honor to serve with you. I think I have a few minutes to Q&A, talk to you about, certainly give us some final perspectives on things as I get ready to do the handoff. So I think it's over to you, General Kelly. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, yes, please. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Thank you.
We do have time for questions. There are folks with microphones. If you would just identify yourself by either standing or raising your hand. Thank you for bringing the house lights up. That'll help. So someone, first question? Right here, Chief?
Okay.
No. Anyone? Come on, folks.
It's always
Don't be
tough
shy.
to get that first one, yeah. This isn't a command that's usually bashful. I mean, I can say anything now, right? I'm getting ready to go. As you'd think I wouldn't before. Sure.
Right.
General Cox,
right
how's
here.
it going, sir? Yes, sir. Yeah, so, and you know this, sir, so a little loaded question, right? Because General Cox was at the helm when we started this whole thing in A1. But hey, where you sit is where you stand on this. And there was a lot of work done we needed to do as an Air Force. I just got to spend some time with the chiefs on this before we walked in here. So from where I sit and when I look out at the Air Force, we're exactly where we should be. I say that, and not to say that we're done and I think this is all right and perfect, because I don't say that and I don't believe that. What I say is we've made a tremendous leap forward in the evolution of our system to get it where it needs to be for now. And over the next year and a half, because we're about a year and a half, almost 2 years into it, we need to tweak it and we need to consistently do this. And I shared this analogy with the chiefs and first sergeants earlier, because we learned a lesson here. I mean, we needed to get after this for a long time. Nobody would have said we didn't need to get after it. But it wasn't the right time for all the reasons in the Air Force. It wasn't because people didn't think it was important. It was just other things going on in the Air Force. But we did get after it, and it was pretty traumatic for some, right? And dramatic for others. At the end of the day, we promoted the same amount of people in our Air Force. Commanders had a sense of input and influence to this, unprecedented than any other time. It's putting performance first, and that's what we wanted. But again, there is work to be done here. And what we did bake in, and you'll see as we publish the new instruction on the evaluation system and weighted airman promotion system, is just like we learned over time with basic military training. Every 3 years, we look at basic military training, whether we think it's going well or not. We look at it, we scrub the entire curriculum to make sure it is meeting the demands of the operational Air Force. So we're setting up those airmen right. So what we've done in the new instruction is bake that same exact thing in. We are going to look at the evaluation system and weighted airman promotion every 3 years with the senior enlisted leadership in the Air Force A1 and just scrub it and say, is it where it needs to be? And that way, over time, we'll continue to evolve it, make the corrections where you need to, and it'll keep pace with the evolving Air Force. So I think it's working well. I think the confidence level is higher. This was never about we were promoting the wrong people. Anybody that says that just hasn't been listening. This was all about performance counting first and foremost and getting the order right. We were promoting good people, people that should have been promoted, but we weren't getting the order right because we didn't have the discernment. So again, I think by and large the feedback that we're getting from airmen is they like the system, but there's room for improvements. There's rooms to tweak, and we should be willing to do it. But I think you have to temper that with get enough data, right? So make sure you can sift through emotion, right? And passion, and then figure data into that, and then make the tweaks and just keep doing that. So I'm comfortable where we're at, where we need to be. I'm not comfortable if we just stop, because we'll have missed the opportunity to get this to continue on the right path. But thank you, sir, for your leadership in this. It was a challenging time, as you know, just to get that all wrapped up and get it out the door, but it's working. It is working. What else? Please.
On? Okay. Chief, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, my honor.
Appreciate your time. Colonel Fred Thaden from Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst.
Yes, sir.
So this is a bit of a selfish question, but I'll take it. Joint basing.
Yeah.
So in light of General Goldfein's, one of his priorities being the joint fight, joint readiness, just interested in your thoughts on the future of joint basing and perhaps how we might leverage those 6 Air Force-led joint bases in this case. There's 12 total, but 6 Air Force-led joint bases with regard to General Goldfein's vision for jointness, more joint readiness. Thank you.
Sure. So, certainly there's opportunity, right? I mean, if we're on the same yard as our joint team, there could be opportunity to kind of leverage that in a way that's better for the nation, right? Better for the joint team. I don't think that translates in any way in a tangible discussion that we think we should be doing more joint basing. One, that decision was made completely separate of, they thought we all needed to be together as a joint team and train as a joint team. It was a fiscal type of reality thing of consolidating resources and locations, creating some synergy, but not necessarily in this idea that we were going to train together, we were going to somehow coalesce, and all of our bases would become a JTF, right? I mean, that's not really what the intent was. But again, I do think there's opportunity, right? When you're together, there is opportunity, and we've actually exploited that opportunity over time, and probably already were before we called them a joint base. We were there and we did things with those units. So again, I think kind of 2 separate issues. Yes, opportunity, we should always look to exploit that. The idea that there's any real discussions amongst the services and within OSD, none that I've heard of doing any additional joint basing, and certainly not an effort right at this stage of the game with General Goldfein, where he's saying, hey, I think we need to do more joint basing so we can kind of get after developing joint leaders. I think this comes down to a little bit different kind of a construct of how we prepare, how we train, how we develop and educate, and where we value certain things to make sure when we put our airmen and we will, and do all the time into that enjoying environment that, we walk into there not really needing to pick up to speed, but being ready to go right off the start line. Again, we do remarkably well when we deploy, but if we're going to do some self-analysis, we're not as good off the start line in a lot of cases. By the end of any type of JTF, we're on all cylinders, we're great, we pick up quick, but a lot of times we're not in the same place as the other services are off the start line, and that's just kind of, putting it on the table and calling yourself out and saying, hey, we probably can do better in the development, both on our officers and our enlisted side of the house, and we just got to figure out that battle rhythm. Make sense? Yeah. What else? Please.
Mark.
Hey, Mark. I appreciate that.
One change or changes that maybe you weren't able to push through or get through?
Yeah.
Looking back on it, that would be a challenge for the next Chief Master Sergeant.
Yeah, so that's kind of a question you think came up earlier today. I'm not going to predict the challenge that the 18th Chief Master Sergeant Air Force is going to face, because I promise you, when I came into the position and General Welch brought me on, we had talked a lot before I came into the position about where he wanted to go and what we wanted to do, and 3 months later that conversation was over. We went into sequestration, the whole world kind of shifted again, and you adjust with where the Air Force needs to go to meet the demand signal of our nation and what is happening globally. So for me to sit there and say, I think they need to do this and do the path, that wouldn't be fair to them. I'm going to be there supporting them. I mean, whatever challenge they face, I promise you I'll be there to support them in any way I can so they can take the Air Force and be in that position and do so. There are certainly always things you leave on the table. You actually don't. You put them in the top left drawer and you leave them for the person coming after you and say, I think you really need to work on that. But, they'll decide what they pull out of that drawer is the right time or not. And some of that stuff, goes through several Chief Master Sergeants of the Air Force where it's the right time for the Air Force to kind of pull it out and work it in the way that they do. But I wish if out of any of the things that we took on, and this is a challenging thing, I think we did a fair job, and I would only give it a fair mark of teeing up the conversation. I do think we're going to have to consistently get after this, and the Chief does too, and this idea of how we get this work-life balance thing right. I mean, so we've talked about it, I've talked about it, certainly for my tenure, but we haven't been able to codify that in a way that I myself feel I've seen tangible differences across the force, and I wish it was different. I mean, we ask a tremendous amount of each and every one of you and your families, and my fear for our Air Force and then for our nation is if we don't get that right at some point, if we don't reconcile that, really good and talented people aren't going to stay with us. Because, these are unprecedented times. Every day creates that new dynamic where you say, today is more unprecedented than the day before. Why? Because we're more globally engaged today than we have been in the history of our country. Every day that we remain in sustained combat operations, it's another day longer that we remain in sustained combat operations. We are still the smallest Air Force we've been, despite the fact that we've modestly grown this last year by about 4,500 people, and we're going to grow maybe just a little bit more. That's still not going to be enough to meet the demand signal. And when you talk about an all-volunteer professional force like you, that in itself is unprecedented when you go back to that video when it all started. Great men and women, willing to serve and sacrifice, great people. They were not capable airmen as you are capable today. They were great for their time, but they pale in comparison to the capabilities that you bring to the fight today. And they'd be the first to tell you that. They were the ones that did it. So how we get right with that as an Air Force and how we have this real conversation of, reasonable, sustainable work-life balance for men and women and their families, we've got to contend with that. We just have to, because the demand signal will not diminish. It will not diminish. How we handle ourselves is important. Because you have, a tech sergeant in the United States Air Force and a family that makes a decision to give up their leg to continue to serve. We have to, as an institution, have a commitment to that family that says you can have a life, that you don't have to give up everything that's important to you for your nation. When it's time to go to the fight, you go to the fight, and it happens. But the idea when we're doing all this organization, training, equipment, right, the development, the growth, the readiness, you have to balance that. You have to come to terms with that. And we have not come to terms with that as an Air Force. We just have not. And we do a lot of important stuff. I mean, we just do. So I hope they carry that forward, because I think if we fail to acknowledge it and we fail to do something in the future, my prediction would be, and I would very much hope that I would be wrong in this prediction, that people are just going to make different life decisions. They have options. They're educated. They're trained. They're talented. They can do other things. They're willing to serve and sacrifice. They're willing to be part of something that is larger than themselves and desire to be so. But if it becomes so unreasonable, so unsustainable, then the right answer is to go. It really is. So we have to own that, and it starts with the leadership. It starts with an acknowledgement of it, and it starts with being able to tell our story in a different way so people understand what they're asking may not be doable. It may not be. So I think whoever comes after me, I know the chief, General Goldfein, and with Secretary James, it's the number one priority is people. I mean, so we're getting after this, and we're nicking away at this, but there's a lot to be done here. All right. What else?
Are there any other questions?
All right, last chance. Sir, hey, General Sharp.
Right here.
All right. Yeah. I'm going to remember you. I'll be honest with you. So I've loved this. Athena and I grew up in our Air Force. I've been in really. Yeah. Oh, I'll remember our time, sir. Don't remember. I'll be able to tell that story in a public forum in the future.
There's a lot of us are going to remember Sharpie.
Yeah. But I think when I think about it, it's been 32 years for Athena and I, 31 years of marriage. We did this in uniform for 26 years together. When I look at the life that we've been blessed to have, it's happened because of this. We have loving, great parents who we're connected with, but to be honest with you, we left them as very young children, probably in their mind, and young adults in our own. And then, we grew up in our Air Force with you. And everything that we have, we owe a debt of gratitude to you. So I'll always be indebted to that and grateful for that. Both Athena and I will be. And I'll remember you, and I'll forget a lot of other stuff. And that'll be okay. That'll be okay. I mean, because it really is, what makes this all worthwhile is you. It really is the friendships, the stories, the encounters, the support we provide each other. It's priceless. It is priceless. So the good news is I'll hang around so I won't have to rely on my fact that I'll forget a lot of stuff, right? So younger will continue to remind you of the things that you forget, right? And then I'll get really old and I'll digress, right? And I'll remember I'll pick that Polaroid picture in time where it was all perfect for me, and I'll tell stories about that for the rest of my life. That's how it works, but that's okay, right? That's the cycle of life. But it truly has been an honor, and again, I want to make sure that I don't leave anybody confused about how grateful I am to the men and women in this command. General McNabb, under your leadership, Chief Curver, I truly, to be honest, 18th Air Force. I was going to retire. Athena did, and that was the 26-year point. Athena retired. I spent a lot of time in AMC, right? 15th EMTF, 6th Air Mobility Command, 18th Air Force. Somehow the elusive Air Mobility Command position was not going to be a place that Chief Cody was going to reside at the MAGCOM. And leave it. Athena retires. I'm going to retire a year later. We're going to make our transition, and felt totally good with that we had been fortunate to have the opportunities that we did in our Air Force at that point. And then, Tuesday's another day, right? And then Wednesday's another day, and you get an opportunity to continue to serve. And, at the end of this, I share with you this because you get asked this a lot at the end, right? Well, what's your legacy? I don't have a legacy. I'll be a number, and I'm okay with that, 17. Because this position is bigger than anybody that's ever been in it or ever will be in it. And I'm proud of the fact that I was able to do that. The legacy of these last 4 years belonged to the United States Air Force. Whatever was good in it, you own it because you did it. Whatever we screwed up, yeah, we did it, we screwed it up, we should have gave you better direction, we should have researched you better. That's just the nature of our business, and that's the way it is. But I wish you all Godspeed, and it's been an honor of a lifetime to serve with you. Thanks so much. Thanks. Thank you.